Welcome to the Convinced God Moves podcast, where stories of struggle are met with hope. My name is Audra, and the mission here is to record stories of getting through tough seasons. Today's episode, we've got a mom and dad describing the years of watching their daughter recover from a stroke. They share how their daughter Katie still has no control in her left arm. Despite this, they want to be clear that Katie is alive because of God's miraculous healing. Mary wrote me after our recording saying, Facebook and prayer chains were a powerful tool in sending out specific prayer requests. I know many people were praying, and daily God was healing Katie. Glen and Mary do a fantastic job of sharing the ways they found perspective over the last 8 years of recovery. Here is their story.
What happened was after she gave birth to her second baby, this happened 2 months after he was born, a stroke after pregnancy and birthing. So she was actually at work, and her coworkers saw what was happening and got immediate emergency help there. And then she was life-flighted to Spokane, which is our closest big hospital. There was a lot of touch and go. But the amazing thing is the networking of prayer warriors that surrounded our friends and family and their friends and family and churches' prayer chains, and because of the swelling of her brain, the things that were going on, it was very much minute by minute, didn't know how things were going to work out. And it just so happened that our pastor happened to be in Spokane at the time. He beat us to the hospital and was there with Katie. I happened to be in Boise, which is 6 hours away. It was hard. I couldn't get a flight out quick enough, so I drove from Boise to Lewiston and got Glen, and we joined together to Spokane, still with not knowing what was happening. The surrounding presence of the Holy Spirit and songs and, those kind of things get you through those times when you think, I can't drive myself right now to 6 hours to get home. But God is always present. Even when you can't see or don't know, you feel the presence of people praying for you.
She was in the hospital there for some time, and then she went right to a rehab place and right near the hospital in Spokane, and she was there, I don't remember exactly, I think it was around 5 weeks.
So in-house therapy, we were either with the kids and her husband was with her, or vice versa.
Her initial stroke left her in a lot of ways blind on the left side of her body because it was a right hemisphere stroke. And so when she would walk down the hallway or ride in a wheelchair, was pushing it, she'd just go right into the wall on her left side. When she was given a piece of paper and an object or a design to trace, she would trace the right half of it and think she was finished. But that all cleared up. Her speech, her saggy smile, she worked clear through that, where if you didn't watch her carefully, you wouldn't know she didn't have use of her left arm now.
An interesting thing, my mom had just died in July prior to Katie's stroke in August. When she was in the hospital and they were deciding if they were going to have to make an incision to make space for the swelling, we said, oh, is your mouth dry? Can we swab your mouth? And she said, yeah, swab my mouth, but don't start playing the hymns. Because that's what we did with my mom. We played hymns around the clock so that she would be comforted. And Katie, then we realized it made us cry and laugh at the same time because she had her personality still.
It was interesting, too, because she wasn't that overt with humor before. One of the times that I was in there, a nurse came in and she said, we need to give you a shot in the stomach. We do this for all our stroke people. Katie looked up at me and she said, I'm a stroke people now, and giggled.
We became the second set of parents for this baby, and his name is Everett. Olivia was 3 at the time, so there were 2 babies, 2 kids, and they, because we live at close proximity, 45 minutes away from each other, the kids were already grounded with us. We had a great relationship, so being at our house was as if being at their house, and so that flow went really well.
Mary was always intricately involved with family. I came from a family when it was time to watch grandkids, my parents, and I watched them just kind of observe. I had to learn to do this, but Mary has way more energy and way more ideas and way more natural ability in this area that I have ever had. And so I've learned a lot from her over the years, and I really have come to enjoy that part of it where I'm not a bystander.
Ideas of how to support each other, and especially her husband. All the attention was at Katie, of course, and the kids, and here he is like, who are we going to be now, and am I going to get to see you tomorrow? Checking in, like, could I come and do the laundry? Could I do and he's kind of the Mr. Mom of the home. He's very talented at those things, and he'd say, nope, that helps me relax, or that helps me this. Anyway, he's the kind of a personality that will tell you what's helpful. It was great. And they had just purchased the home probably 3 to 4 months prior to the second baby coming. And of course, stairways everywhere, and here they have this new mortgage, and it's not feasible potentially for someone that's going to be in a wheelchair. And so he has to start thinking about, do we need to sell this? What kind of a home can we get quickly that'll accommodate Katie's needs? There was a lot, and she's the main salary of the home in their choices of who's going to do what. So a lot of financial issues too. So besides physical, there were all those other kind of outlayers that he had to consider.
Her employer, Schweitzer Engineering, he had mentioned that her job was not a problem.
The president of the company.
Yeah, that's the president of the company. Then things would happen along, like he said, for the rest of her life, we're taking care of all of her, any physical therapy that she needs. She had the stroke 1st of August. Well, in November was her yearly review. And so in her mind, she was thinking, they'll probably reduce my hours of work, maybe put me in a different place. But at the end of it, they had promoted her, given her a raise, taken care of all the needs that she has. And he's kind of known for doing this in his business. So much appreciation goes to him for all of those kinds of things that he does in supporting Katie.
For continuing to believe in her and what her gifts were and are. On the onset, when we were all at the hospital, just kind of flailing, not knowing what we should be doing and all, this same company send their PR people out, and we had hotels, we had snacks at the hospital. They supported the other part of the family as well. I just can't even count the many things that they honored her with in supporting her and what was going on.
She was full-time shortly after November, and she would work at home for a stretch of time. She wasn't able to drive for a few years, but she got back into driving and now is able to drive her kids to school, then drive herself to work.
The technology that's in place now, where a lot of her work was typing with both hands, now the voice to, text. So a lot of her work, they accommodated her with any kind of technology that was there. And of course, in our homes, there's smart equipment now. And right away, her husband, Calvin, set up, turn the lamp on, do these kind of things, voice commands. Same with the stove and timers. And we're so blessed to have all these kind of things for people who are impaired with those kind of disabilities now. So that was another big blessing that happened during that time, where there was more and more lock the door, and just voice commands. And the type of stroke, like, because hers was on the side it affected her left side. The right side kept her brain intact, kept her voice and, communication skills and those kind of things. So we were so blessed.
Well, and right now, if you took a PET scan of her brain, one side would be completely dark. And so what she has done is she's used one half of her brain to continue doing everything that a normal person would with both hemisphericity. We were in the hospital with Katie for her rehab when the speech therapist came in. And he said to Katie, I'm going to give you 15 words, and then I'll ask you what those 15 words are at the end of the time. In my mind, I'm thinking, if I get 3, I would be lucky. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So
We had her doing map skills and all kinds of other things that occupational therapists do and speech therapists. And then he got done having her draw things and do things and said, okay.
So he said, what are those 15 words? She started rattling off words like crazy, and he was looking at his chart, marking. And he said, you got 14 of them. She goes, oh, school.
That was the 15th word.
He said, I don't have this happen, but once, maybe every 2-3 years.
Wow.
And so what is going on in her brain right now, in the half of her brain, is way more than what's going on in our 3 brains combined.
Yeah.
So that was a memory for me. And then she had her time where she had conversations with God. She said, I was talking to God the other day, and I said, well, where were you when I got married? God said, I was right there with you. Do you remember that empty chair by your dad? I was sitting right there. And then she said another time, do you know what God's favorite color is? Because I asked him, and I said, no. He says, I love blue. And he said, I really like the ocean after I made it. There were so many more that I can't remember right now that I had encouraged her to write down, and who knows if that happened. But
during that time, her brain, of course, was working overtime and would need to rest. She'd say, she could do something, then she'd need to take a rest to give the brain a break. But during some of those alone times, quiet times, she had some very personal, intimate conversations with our Heavenly Father. And my mom had just died, I told you, and she said, did you know Grandma's doing all the flowers up in heaven for the Sunday services? She went out and picked, and she named off all the flowers that my mom had raised in gardens, and my mom had done those kind of things at her church. And she said, yeah, she's up there just designing the bouquets, and, she had so many of those moments that were real, but we weren't experiencing those kind of conversations and those intimate times. Along with that, her daughter that was 3 started praying for her mommy and to help her bad leg and her bad arm. And it's so interesting that they've been looking into a surgery on her left arm that's just dead weight, and it's been kind of unapproachable, but the technology and the surgeries that they're doing now have been really remarkable. Her occupational therapist said, well, they're in New York and Chicago, and started naming off all these faraway places, and it's kind of a surgery where you'd need to stay for therapy afterwards. And so, Katie said, well, that's not possible, for us for right now. And anyway, just even 2 weeks ago, she found out with her therapist that they have a specialist in Seattle now that is doing these surgeries. So her little 3-year-old praying for her mommy's bad arm, Olivia may get to see that prayer answered in a way that we didn't expect. Yes, we thought maybe a miracle like her ankle and foot where she didn't have to wear the brace anymore. But here, this little 3-year-old that's now 11 might get to see her mommy's arm get better after all these prayers.
What would you say to somebody who's like, we're doomed? How do you keep that hope?
He's got a whole lot of love for us all, and he'll provide. And with that, the caveat is that are good for us as he sees it, not as we see it. I think one of the things that I realized with Katie is that if God's in charge, I'm fully capable of giving my advice. And I think anybody, would be welcome to give their advice to God. As a father, and as I look at my children, and as they come to me and says, Dad, I think you should, I think, well, good for them for thinking. And I think, will I do that because they ask? It all depends on what's best for the situation. And sometimes I make those decisions, sometimes I don't. And I think that's one of the things God's all about. My favorite poem in the world is about the blind man and the elephant. And they go up to the elephant and touch the elephant, and they're touching different parts. And they're describing God as a trunk of a tree, or a snake, or a rope, or a fan. And the line in the poem that says, each were partly right, but not one was completely right. And I think we see that part of God. We see a little bit that we think we understand, and there's so much more of God that he can then allow us to see his work if we're looking for it. And I think we have to look outside of our box to see those kind of things. For me, with watching Katie, I made sure to marvel at every tiny bit of improvement I saw and keep that as an encouragement. And I also had to make sure that we as prayer people didn't put praise on the prayer for healing Katie. God makes decisions, and he could, if he chose to heal Katie instantly, no doubt. But there's something someone needs through Katie's healing process. And I think that's a whole lot of what Katie needs, a whole lot of what her parents need, a whole lot of what the people around know, and who else I don't think will ever know. So for me, that's been really important to keep in my mind. I would suggest that to help others who have that situation in their lives too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.